Today we're going to go on to simplifying some more radicals. These may actually be a little more complicated than what we saw yesterday, but everything should work out just fine. So let's go ahead and get in there. First of all, let's practice a couple that are like the ones we did yesterday. So we got square root of 27. So we're going to break that down into 3 times 9. And that in turn breaks down into 3 times 3 times 3. So remember we told you to circle any pair of numbers that show up under this radical sign as we factor them like that. You take one out, so we're going to take 1 3 out in front, and the only number that's left inside is that sole 3 right there, so it's going to be 3 times the square root of 3 when we simplify the square root of 27. All right, for 63, that breaks down into 7 times 9. And 9 times 9 breaks down into 3 times 3, and they're all prime factors now, so that's as far as we can take this factor tree. So if we take out one of this pair of 3's out to the front, and what's left behind inside the radical would be that number 7 right there. So we write down the number 7. All right, if we get down to 125, take that particular one, and you'll notice that you've got 5 times 25, which further breaks down into 5 times 5 times 5. So you do have a pair of 5's that you can circle. So when you bring one of those out in front of the radical sign, you'd end up with 5 times the square root of 5. So that would be the radical, or the simplification of that one. And then the last one, we got 72. So we got 8 times 9. 8 breaks down into 2 times 4, or 2 times 2 times 2, whereas 9 breaks down into 3. We better do that right. We got to get that right. So it breaks down into 3 times 3 on the end there for that 9. Okay, so if we're going to do what we just mentioned, we've got to circle every pair of factors that show up in the bottom here. So there's a couple of 2's, there's a couple of 3's. So I'm going to take a 2 out and a 3 out of the radical sign, put it out in front, and all I have left is this 2 right here, so that's going to be the square root of 2. And now you end up with 2 times 3, which is 6, times the square root of 2. And that is our final answer. Okay. What happens if we have variables inside of our radicals when we're simplifying them? Well, let's see what that would look like. So 24, that breaks down into 4 times 6, and 4 breaks down into 2 times 2. 6 breaks down into 2 times 3. And then for the variables, when you bring those down, you just look at the number on the exponent. There happens to be a 2 there, so we write down 2 x's. All right, now we're going to circle a pair of 2's. We're going to circle a pair of x's. Those are the 2 terms that we can take one out by taking the square root. And so we're going to bring a 2 out in front of the square root sign and an x. And what's going to be left under the square root sign is that 2 times 6, or 2 times 3, which is 6. So there's how you do a problem like that. It's actually pretty easy, not too hard. Okay, so the step-by-step process is as follows. Factor tree the numbers under the radicand, or under the radical. Circle any 2 terms that are the same. For every 2 terms that are the same, you take one out. Any term that doesn't have a pair or gets circled in that pair stays under the radical. All right, let's try a couple more. So 32, we know we can break that down into 4 times 8, or 2 times 2. And I happen to know that 8 breaks down into 2 times 2 times 2. And then you bring down the x on the end. All right, so I circle all the pairs of 2's that are under that particular problem. I got 2 2's here, 2 2's there, and that's all that's left. So I take out one of each of those 2's. So in front of the radical sign, I'm going to have a 2 times 2, and inside the radical, I'm going to have this 2 and x left. So I'd have 2 times x, just like that, and then 2 times 2 out front reduces to just 4. So we end up with 4, the square root of 2x. Okay, let's go on to the next one. 75, that would just be 5, or excuse me, 25 times 3. And 25 times 3 just breaks down into 5 times 5 times 3. All right, so we've got our pair of numbers, I should say. We've got 2 5's that are right there. So and then as far as the a's are concerned, we bring down a couple of a's. So we can circle those as well. Take out one of each of those, take out 1 5 and 1 a, because by taking the square root, we unsquare those 2 pairs, and then left inside the square root symbol is the square root of 3. Okay, last one on this little page. We got 3 times 4, which breaks down into 3 times 2 times 2. Okay, so we look at our pairs, and we've got a pair of 2's right there. So we bring that out in front of the radical, and all that's left underneath our tiny little radical now is square root of 3. So that's going to look like that. So you got 2 times the square root of 3. Huh. Oh, we forgot the variables, though. We've got 4 x's. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 2 pairs of x's. We're going to take out one of each pair out. So that's going to bring 2 x's out in front of this one, which is going to give us x squared times 2 times the square root of 3. All right, let's move on. There's a few more. So let's pick out 1 or 2 of these. Let's try this first one. And these have bigger exponents, so we need to mention these. So 18 breaks down into 2 times 9. And that breaks down into 2 times 3 times 3. And then as far as the variables are concerned, we're going to have 4 x's, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2 y's, 1, 2. All right, so let's count up our pairs of x's, or y's, or pairs of factors. So there's a pair of x's, pair of y's, and a pair of 3's. So all that's going to be left under the radical sign when we get done is that 2. And out front, we're going to have a 3 times x times y. So we'll end up with 3x squared y. Okay. Moving right along, we've got a couple more. So let's see if we can pick out one on here that looks pretty tough. How about let's try this 28u squared y. So if we take a look at that one, 28 is 4 times 7. So those are both, well, we got to break that 4 further. No. 2 times 2 times 7. And then u squared, we bring that down and break that into u times u. And we bring down the y as well. Okay, so what are the pairs of numbers that we have? We have 2 2's and 2 4's. So we bring one of each out, we'll have 2 times 4 times the square root of 7y. And 2 times 4 is 8. So we end up with 8 times 7 square roots of y.
I'm sorry, I thought you got
There you go. Okay, so let's move right along then. What if we have huge numbers here? Man, that's getting kind of scary looking. Let me show you a secret. So as you take out 28, we did that one just a minute ago. That's 4 times 7, or 2 times 2 times 7. Well, what about the variables? Well, here's a trick for you. If this number is even, which it is, you just take half of that, which is 8, and bring it out in front of the radical. So when we get done, we notice we have a pair of 2's. So that's going to give us 2 square roots of 7. And then we have 16 x's. So if I divide 16 in half, I'm going to get x to the 8th power. And that will come out front. Okay, so there's that one. Now let's kind of follow up that idea. Let's see what that really means. So on 27, we got 3 times 9. Or 3 times 3 times 3. Well, as far as the 19 are concerned, x to the 19th, we could think of that as x to the 18th times x to the 1st. And now we've got an even number of exponents out there, so if we take the square root of, or half of those, half of 18, we end up with, out front we end up with one of these 3's, so 3x to the 9th times the square root of 3 and x to the 1st, or 3x. Okay, so there's that one. So let's try a few of those with our exponents. So radical or simplify radicals with variables worksheet is our assignment today. So thank you very much.